Welcome to A Mindful Life. We are here with the Cosmology of Being, and we're going to go into outer forces again. We're going to do one more video about outer forces. This subject seems to really keeps growing in this cosmology, okay? And I'm going with the flow. I'm going with the flow on this, okay? So A Mindful Life is here to offer philosophical, spiritual technology so that you can become who you really are, so that you can live your truth. A Mindful Life is not offering dogma, not all the answers. There's no gurus on this one, all right? You have to actually, this is a technology, so this means you put in the work. Technology is meant to be used, not just philosophical or logical, but to be used to change your life. Okay, so let's go through this video on outer forces, and this is going to sort of answer a few questions that came up. The first question is this, a shortcut. Can I skip? There may be a little win. Can I skip this retrosynthetic analysis stuff? In other words, if I see that I got possessed by an outer force and I acted out, or whatever the case may be, do I really have to go backwards in my heart to where this all started? Do I have to go back to childhood? Because that's often what happens. We go back to childhood. Do I have to go back there? Do I have to figure out what the apex perspective is? And go back and watch the previous video, because I'm going to be using some words and some terminologies that you may not know unless you watch that previous video. So that's the question. Do I have to do this? Why can't I just start from where I am? If I see that I was not conscious and aware and I did something, how come I just can't deal with that right there? How come I just can't change my perspective right there on that? How come I just can't start working on new thoughts right there? Why do I have to know where it came from? This is a question. And the answer is you don't. You do not have to know where all this started with you. You do not have to know what the apex perspective is. You don't have to know where it came from. You don't have to go back to childhood. You don't have to go back to 5 years. You don't have to go back to 5 minutes. You can actually start right where you are and change it up. You can start to develop new thoughts, to practice new thoughts that lead to a new knowing, and you have a different belief about who you are on this subject. And so you act differently towards this. So you don't have to go back. For example, say you have a problem with speaking. You get nervous. They call you up to speak maybe once a month. And you get nervous every time you forget the words, people laugh at you. It's really a big deal. A lot of fear. Well, that could have started in childhood. It could have started at any time. However, instead of going through this retrosynthetic analysis, which I will get a better word for, what you do is you just start to practice public speaking in the mirror, around your friends or family. Start reading about it. Start watching people until you practice those thoughts enough, because that's what you're doing, until you practice those thoughts enough to where you don't have that. Your perspective has changed because your knowledge has changed. Your belief has changed. So your perspectives are now different. So yes, the answer is you don't have to go back. You don't have to do all of that. However, there is benefit in knowing your history. You've heard this before. Those who do not know the history are doomed to repeat it. Sometimes there is a point of view or perspective that we picked up that covers many areas. It's not just that one area. But if we deal with just that one area, we may still be struggling in different areas. If we go back and we find out what this dominant point of view is, and oftentimes when you figure out what it is, you're going to know where it came from automatically. When you find that out through heart space, then what happens is many areas change at once. It can be take a lot of labor, arduous, a lot of work to, okay, I worked on this. Okay, now I worked on that. Okay, now I worked on this. Now, okay, I worked on that. What if there was one thing that you could just do that could change all of that? For example, with the public speaking, say you're in church or somewhere and someone asked you to sing. They heard you sing in the shower. They heard you sing on the block, but they just called you up to sing. Now you're super nervous. Now you dealt with the public speaking thing, but you don't understand. You're super nervous when it comes to singing because this is singing. It's different. Public speaking is public speaking. Singing is singing. It's different. Is it really? What if we could go back and we could do retrosynthetic analysis and we could see that there is here a fear of speaking. There is here a fear of singing. But bigger than that, there's here a fear of coming in front of people, of making a presentation in front of people, and that this happened in childhood. You picked this up, you had an experience, or there were people around you who were afraid, and you picked up this perspective, and it just keeps manifesting in your life, even though it makes no sense for you, even though it doesn't benefit you, it keeps manifesting in your life. What if we could go back and deal with that as opposed to fear of singing or fear of public speaking? What if we could just deal with that whole thing? Then many areas change at once. We would really feel like a different person. So that's the value in going through this retrosynthetic analysis stuff. But you don't have to. You don't have to do that. You can just deal with the one subject at a time. Okay? So I hope I clarified that up. The second thing was this: the indistinguishability of perspective and reality. Like I said before, you do not create your own reality. We don't create reality. What we do, we are perspective creators. We generate perspective. And as long as we're having a perspective. As long as we are existing, we have a perspective. We can't get away from that. Even if the perspective is that you have no perspective, that's a perspective. So we talked about that in the last video. Now, when it comes to this indistinguishable part, I told you that's what the problem is, because our perspective in the moment on something is indistinguishable from the things themselves in that moment. They're indistinguishable. And I gave you the example of the doctor, right? Now, this indistinguishability can easily lead to somebody thinking that they create their own reality. But this sun is on the back of my neck. I didn't create that sun. It's a part of everything else around me. But I didn't create any of this either. So let me give you an example. How outer reality becomes indistinguishable. Just say, this is an example. I got a text message, right? And the text message had exclamation points, it had capital letters, it had all this stuff in it. And when I saw the text message, I was like, oh, okay, they must really, they're just expressing themselves through the language, the words, right? That they want me to hear what they're saying, that they are emphatic, that they're passionate about this. That's all I thought. And I put it away, and that was it. I got a call from this person the next day. And they say, hey, listen, I apologize because I was a little short with you yesterday in the message. And I'm like, oh yeah, I was a little angry. I was a little upset. I was having a bad day. I'm like, really? I didn't see it that way. It wasn't that to me in that moment. You see, my perspective on that was what I just said it was. Not only that, my state of being was relatively up, was relatively high. So when it came into my universe, it came in and had to come through the front door, meaning that it came through my perspective and my state of being. So that at that time, for me, it would never have meant that. And that's what it was to me, you see, because it didn't change at all. The next day, the person told me that it was intended to be a certain way, and it was a certain way for them. But for me, according to my perspective, it was that. That's what it was in that moment of now. Now, they said in this next day, they told me what it was. I said, oh, really? Oh, you were upset? Oh, okay. It's still my perspective either way. and it becomes indistinguishable. See, outer reality is going to conform to your perspective. It's going to conform to your perspective. It can't help but conform to your perspective in that moment. But let's not confuse that with being capital G. We did not create the sun. I didn't create that text message that came to me, but I created my perspective on the text message. I created the meaning and value on the text message. I created my state of being when the text message came, my energy level. Some say my vibration. I created that, but I didn't create the text message. So in that moment, that's what the text message was to me. Think about this. Next time you get a message, how are you seeing that message? What is it to you? So outer reality is going to conform to your perspective. Even if you feel like you're out of control and it just is this and I can't, that's still a perspective, because everyone won't see it that way. This is powerful. This is power for you as little g, as the creator of the universe. You're the creator of the universe, not capital G, but little g. We have so much leeway and authority over our lives. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention, and this came up, was the flow from the I am self, because we've talked a lot about outer forces coming in, but we mentioned the flow from the I am self. But listen, God's will for you is your highest will for you. It's the highest will for you. We may think we want things in this world because we've picked up perspectives and we think we want them, but only the higher self and God knows what we really desire. And it's not a compromise. There's no compromise in this. There's no compromising in this. So there's nothing to overcome here. Now, what's going on is this. We are being in a 3D world of contrast, of up and down, good and bad. We're being in a world that is not of our creating. We didn't create this world. We didn't create this reality. However, this contrast in this world, it is the very mechanism that we push against, quote unquote, and maybe that's not the best word, push against, but that's what causes us to manifest who we really are in this world. If I'm in a poverty situation, I want to be prosperous. So I change, contrast comes in, and I'm able to change my perspective to where I begin to become stronger financially. If I'm in a bad relationship, a toxic relationship, I want a healthy relationship. So I'm able, through this perspective generating process and the other things we talked about in the cosmology, to change the universe. I'm able to change the universe. But understand, listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying that when you change the universe, the outer world is going to conform to that through your perspective. It can't help but do that. But we didn't create the outer world, and we don't have to. Just like the text message, did it really matter what this person intended? Did it matter? Did it matter? The answer is really doesn't. It doesn't matter, because it's my perspective that made it what it was to me, but I didn't create the message. So we're in a world that we actually need to have a desire for freedom. We actually need to have a desire for joy and growth. Growth is just coming into who you really are. That's all growth is. Growth is just coming into who you really are, your blueprint in this physical world of contrast that we did not create. That's what growth is. All right. So that's creating the universe right there. All right. So this world and this contrast this world that we come into connection with is important. If there was nothing to see that was different from the truth, we wouldn't have to move to the truth. So be glad you're in this world. Be glad of all the contrast that we've experienced recently, because it's true that you are able to find a new you, and the new you is really just who you really are that you haven't seen before, because there's been so much layers of stuff over it. Okay, so that's very important. So I want to cover those three things in this video. Outer reality is going to conform to your perspective. It can't help but do that. But we're not creating outer reality. We are generators of perspective. We can't help but do that as long as we're being. This is very important for your cosmology, for the universe being little g. All right. So I wanted to finish that up. Those were some things that came up. Now, in the next video, I'm going to conclude it because I'm pretty sure we're done with outer forces now. Okay. So in the next video, we're going to conclude the whole cosmology, and we're going to move on to something else. Okay. Thanks for coming. A Mind for Life. Peace out.